Chelsea. Hi there, folks. You can all hear me? Yes. All right. To begin, let me be clear. I'm not here as a representative of my employer. I'm here as a child of God, a citizen of this great country and a resident of this vast province. I have always been a political animal, someone who believes in personal liberty. And I have always been a woman, one who encourages other women to think freely. But I have not always been pro-life. There is a saintly man, a famed Canadian pro-life priest, who witnesses to the sanctity of life on Parliament Hill every day Parliament has sat since September of 1989. When I was 14 years old, on a school trip to our nation's capital, I strayed from my class crowd and struck up an antagonistic conversation with Father Van Heen. Well, less of a conversation of depth or meaning, more like a string of chants I had heard before. Keep your rosaries out of my ovaries. You don't have a uterus. You can't tell me what to do with mine. Father Van Heen, a slight man, stood over me quietly, patiently, until my teacher grabbed me very nearly by the collar, placing me back in line with my peers. The second time I encountered Father Van Heen was last spring. This time, I towered over him. An outstretched hand at first, and then a hug. I reminded him of our first meeting. I told him I had since seen the light of life. I apologized. He forgave me. I thanked him for praying for me. I know he did. We both had tears in our eyes. A lot's happened in those 10 years, but it's too cold in here for me to cover it all. I'll pick that up. Pro-life and anti-littering. Okay. Put simply, a growth in faith and exposure to facts revealed. All liberty depends on life. Many think that if you support individual rights, free markets, a limited government, you should be pro-choice. These views are flawed. There is no right more basic than life. This fundamental right to life extends to the unborn. Never mind that they are voiceless and defenseless. Many children and elderly are too. Abortion involves intentionally killing a helpless, innocent human being, and that is murder! My friends, we live in a province, in a nation that views murder as a constitutional right. One that justifies itself with an attitude that says, if you don't like an abortion, just don't have one, and pay for mine. Worse yet, generations of women are being educated to equate a right to murder their own child with their own liberty as a female. What rights do women have without life? None. All liberty depends on life. Make no mistake though, girls, grown women are fed a rich diet of my body, my choice mantra. It's not your body. The fetus has a different DNA and blood type. Not to mention ultrasound abortions show separate body within your womb, backing away from that instrument that is about to cause them pain, eventually tear it apart and take its life away. But I digress. The opposing voice to this mantra, one that tries to educate young women in truth about their bodies and their life, and the body that is within them, the sanctity, the dignity, the life within them both. That voice is now threatened within Ontario schools. Ontario's Education Minister, Laurel Broughton, recently called the pro-life stance misogynistic. Bill 13 is about tackling misogyny, she said. Taking away a woman's right to choose could arguably be one of the most misogynistic actions one could take. This has since stoked concerns about this Liberal government and how it wants to dictate what Catholics can and cannot teach. And as a side note, enough of this nonsense that life is a Catholics only issue. Until recently, the main strands of all of Western civilization, I'm talking here about pagan, Greco-Roman, and Judeo-Christian, both strands have agreed that abortion is wrong. Make no mistake, the Hippocratic Oath, the reason why doctors don't say it anymore is because it makes them take an oath against abortion.
That's right. That's right.
But getting back to Minister Laurel Broughton, misogynistic. Really, what an ignorant thing to say. Either Minister Broughton is ignorant of the meaning of the word, which alludes to being inspired by a hatred of women, or she is ignorant of how abortion affects women, in which case she would be far from alone. See, if you have not had an abortion or participated in one in some capacity, you may not have witnessed the direct effects of this Holocaust. But we all experience it indirectly. A widening gap between childbearing and sex, an expanding culture of death in which human life is less and less sacred. Words like sacred and so on, I don't want to get too holy here for Queen's Park, so let me be clear. Abortion, my friends, is a real war on women. I know, the word choice sounds friendly to me as a left-wing minority group member, as being a woman and all. But isn't well-informed choice the best choice? And since this isn't an Ontario Catholic school micromanaged by pro-murder bureaucratic bullies, why not elucidate that choice now? Abortions don't just hurt the human life that they end. Abortions hurt women who undergo these evil procedures. According to Forbidden Grief, the unspoken pain of abortion, 64%, a clear majority of women who had abortions, report that they felt pressured to do so by others. And as with all medical procedures, there are risks. The most common and immediate short-term risks include infection, failure to extract the quote-unquote products of conception. Do you like how we call them that? The products of conception? What they mean are the fetal and placental tissues, the babies within you, and even women bleeding to death. And complications from an abortion may surface as many as 10, 15 years later. A survey of women conducted 15 years after they had abortions found that 75% regretted having that abortion. 75%, folks. Almost done here. I'm going to skip over a whole bunch of stats I have here, but I want to say that I haven't even touched on the increased likelihood of breast cancer, premature births, ectopic pregnancies, uterine perforation, which usually lead or can lead to infertility, and the higher chance of future offspring being born prematurely with cerebral palsy and other disabilities which usually result from prematurity. Further still, one authoritative study completed in Finland found that suicide rates associated with abortion are 6 times higher than suicide rates associated with childbirth. That same study, well, it said that those who undergo induced abortion from experience a death rate nearly 4 times greater than women who give birth. Friends, the promise of safe and legal abortions has failed. For decades, women have not been told the truth about the development of the unborn child or the potential risks they face. Many who support the right of a woman to murder her own child have good intentions. But they are unaware of the risk that these women will face. There has thus been a war waged on woman, one that seeks to keep her in the dark about the so-called choice that she makes. A choice to murder her child and a choice to place her own health at risk. And today, in Ontario, there's a threat to the future generations as our education system There is a threat to future generations as our education system suggests limitations be put on upon disagreement with this culture of death. Imagine pro-life teachings against the law in Ontario's new era of Bill 13.
No way.
How free is a nation where the freedom of speech for one is favored over the freedom of speech for another, simply because one is more comfortable to talk about? As it stands, my government is taking my money to pay for murder, even though it violates my constitutional rights of freedom of religion and conscience. Now my government wants to take my tax money, the tax-funded schools, and turn them into spaces that should be, and turn these spaces where students ought to be exposed to a wide range of ideas. Well, this government wants to turn them into echo chambers. That, my friends, is not education, and that is not freedom. Today, I have come to our province's legislature with a message, no matter how uncomfortable. Can you point that this way? I want Kathleen Wynne to hear this. Premier Wynne, as Ontario's first openly gay female leader, I pray you find yourself not confined by the false grouping manufactured by media and mainstream that knots together issues of sexual orientation and matter of life and abortion. Outside of Scripture, these two issues have no common ground. Instead, I beg you to place women's rights at the forefront of the focus while you are in government. For after all, women's rights are human rights, and the first and most fundamental human right is the right to life. Thank you.